Yo guys, and welcome back for another Blue Protocol Star Resonance video. So today I want to talk to you guys about Goblin Lair. So today we did get access to the master mode versions of the dungeon, and my group went and completed that along with the other master modes up until level 5, where we did run into a DPS issue. But I thought it would be useful to kind of show maybe the routes that we're looking at doing and just some general tips for the dungeon to make sure that we're trying to be as effective as possible. I want to make clear this isn't going to be the number one strategy forever. There will likely be better routes. There will likely be, easier packs to do and, easier packs to skip and stuff like that. But this just happens to be what we found after our first, set of runs now that we have access to the master mode. And if we do get significant changes, I'll be happy to make another guide. It'll just be like an updated version of this one. Really quickly, I'm going to be showing a map. If you don't want to look at the map, use the chapters down below to skip to the actual playthrough. Now, this might end up being a bit different than some of our previous stuff, but just bear with me and let me know if it's something that you do like or that you don't. Sometimes I know it can be handy to kind of have a general feel of where you're going. And in fact, in WoW, we used to have add-ons that would kind of give us a general map, so that way we knew ahead of time. So that's kind of what I tried to do here. So I made my own map here, and this is generally the layout of the Goblin mode dungeon. And so I've done a few things here to try and mark what I think is kind of important in this run, as well as, places that I might want to use Tempest Ogre, for example. When we were doing our runs, I did notice that there were a couple places I think that are going to be easier to tank the mob. So for example, in the very first room, the first 3 set of adds, those are all the Goblin daggers, and then there's a Goblin melee unit by the locked rune area, the locked rune hallway. And so if you tank all 3 groups on top of the goblin mage over here that actually has the runic symbol or whatever, it will be easier. So that's kind of the point of this tank marker on the map here, just noting where I would tank the mobs in that room, because that's more or less what we're trying to do. We're trying to grab all the mobs in an entire room and then take them down and then move on to the next room. So let's just talk about the route really quick. In general, we found that hitting this room here, the very first room, with our Tempest Ogre and then adding the corruption to all of them via the mechanic in the room, that should be enough to basically make it so you can just go through and do regular pulls the rest of the dungeon. So that's kind of what we chose to do. Something to note is that this room back here, while cool and interesting, did seem like it took quite a bit longer. So I do think this is the route that we prefer at the moment. And then also in Master Mode Dungeon, you actually have to fight an Infernal Ogre as a mini boss in order to get access to this third area back here. Hopefully this kind of gives you a general good first look at kind of, where your placement is. Another thing I want to note too is that we heard that you can use your Tempest Ogre here to pull the mobs from both the higher area on the cliff edge over here, and then also that pulls them all the way down to the bottom mobs here. So that's why the Tempest Ogre down here is in the bottom area by the locked rune hallway. I haven't had a chance to test that myself. However, I truly believe that if you have somebody go up here and aggro these guys and then fall off the cliff and then just hug the side of the cliff, you should be able to LOS them at least around the corner here, and it'll be easier to take care of and group them from there. Something I want to make sure I call out on this map too is that the way this map is laid out is these blue hallways here. They're the ones that are locked by the rune. So if you don't have the rune, you need to kill the mob that has the rune and then you can proceed. So for example, the first room has the mage or whatever over here that will give you the rune, and then you can proceed to the next area, whereas the Infernal Ogre is the one that has it to proceed to the next one after that. All right, so more or less, this is kind of going to be a VOD recording, and then I'll pop in as necessary with extra information just to kind of let you guys know kind of what we're thinking and any tips that I might have. So again, this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where the Goblin Axe unit over here and then these first 3 mobs, they're all going to be something that you can pull very easily to the crossbow and mage units over here on the left. So that would be what I would recommend, just grabbing all of them and then running over here and fighting them in one big death ball. You'll kind of see that actually we didn't really play this very optimally, and in fact we kind of did the opposite. So instead of grouping on the mage, we ended up just grouping on the warrior. But we did have 2 range DPS, so it's not that big of a deal, but again, not exactly optimal. So that's why I mentioned trying to pull it to the other side just to try to kind of optimize the strategy a bit. Now we did decide to go left from there, and that takes us down to this room in here. We like to have our tank use the Tempest Ogre and pull all of the mobs, or as many as we can, here into this corruption unit. Something to note too is if you are a Verdant Oracle and you are using this Blossom ability, it does stun, and it's really helpful, especially when you're doing really big pulls like this. So any class that has any set of interrupts or mini stuns that you can use to kind of help the tank survive is really going to help here, especially on harder difficulties. So if you notice, after doing these 2 rooms, we already have 674 out of the 1200 that we need total for this entire investigation. So it does mean that we are pretty close to our main goal here, which is more or less just making it so we can clear a few more packs and be done. So as I showed on the map here, I would also tank the mobs in this room to the back of this room. And again, it's the same reason. We have melee mobs on the left, melee mobs back here on the right, and then we have the ranged mobs in the back over here. So just pull those melee mobs to the back and tank everything over here. You'll see we kind of didn't really do that correctly. We did some stuns and some pulls, and anyway, it would have been better to just pull all these guys and let them run over to the mage, so that way you can cleave them all down more effectively. But we're doing just fine in terms of time, and it wasn't a big deal. So now, something to note about this sword goblin captain or whatever, he is kind of annoying in how he charges. So if you can have him charge into this wall rather than back into that hallway like we just did, that will save you a little bit of time as well. Then we go up here to the left where we have to fight the mini boss. So this is the Infernal Ogre that I mentioned on the map, and it's actually pretty simple. Just make sure you don't stand in the front and you don't tank anything that's unnecessary. I'm definitely living life on the edge by being too close to the tank here. In general, never stand in front of ogres in this game. That's just a good rule of thumb to follow. And with the mini boss down, we did get our rune and we can move on to the next area. That flame really hurts in this, so do not try and tank it as a DPS or a healer. As you saw there, we took a lot of damage. So again, as I mentioned previously, we did hear from a friend that if you Tempest Ogre down here on this side here, you can actually pull the mobs off of this cliff. Now again, I haven't had the opportunity to test this myself. However, I am inclined to believe that it does exist, and if it doesn't exist, you should be able to at least aggro these guys, or if you don't have a Tempest Ogre, you should be able to at least aggro these guys, drop down the cliff, and hug these sides. If you hug the sides, it should LOS them and force them to run down the ramp and around, so that way you can get them at least closer and try and group them up a little bit better. And again, notice how this mob right here is the Goblin Mage, so I would try and pull everything directly to this Goblin Mage, and then That way you can just AoE them down, especially if you didn't have the Tempest Ogre, right? You can see we're kind of doing this thing where we're kind of running back and forth, and that's just really not efficient and not something you're going to want to do when you're running out of time. So try and be efficient with this and try and pull them down to that spot I mentioned previously. Now for this last room, it's more or less the same. You just kind of fight them on here on the Goblin Mage, the same you normally would in any other run you've ever done of Goblin Lair. So something that you probably should note is that down that hallway is the spider room, and the spider room is kind of an interesting and fun experience. I would recommend doing it once, but I don't think right now that it's a very optimal route in terms of like getting the mob count that you need. But check it out, try it out, and see what you can find. As I said, you guys may find that there are additional routes that you like better, and if you do find something that you like better, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Oh, and before we get to the boss fight, we are trying to get to 500 subscribers, and we are getting very, very close. If you guys could take the time to subscribe to the channel down below, like the video if you like the video, comment if you guys have any questions or want to discuss anything, or if you come up with any better routes or anything, definitely let me know and we'll get back to the boss fight. Now in general, you will find that the boss fight is fairly similar to what it was before, and obviously it's also just more punishing. So keep that in mind. Don't do anything that you wouldn't do. Try and activate your treats, unlike me, before the boss fight starts. So once again, we do have the multiple shields. However, in the past, what we had experienced was a lot of people could solo this in part of the encounter. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case. There might be a technique or people find that they are able to do it. However, hopefully you'll see that it's actually much more specific where you need to hit the ball. So take a look at the shield and look how much the shield actually covers him. I'm not sure that someone could do it. However, if someone could do it, what you probably would have to do is if you go out here far enough and then throw it this way further out, you might have enough time and enough space to actually use your dash to get right here and just wait for it and then push it in. So that might be a way that a person could solo this. It would take probably a little bit more testing, but I do think it would be possible. I think at the current distance that we were before, though, a dash would have taken us too far and maybe too much time. So again, you'll have to try that out and see. I think it is possible to get one person to solo it. It's just going to take a little bit of getting used to aiming it in that very narrow hole that he has open in his shield. If you're a tank too, make sure you're doing your due diligence and you're trying to dodge some of these. The extra attacks that you get from the boss, while they might not hurt, they do kind of stack up, right? And so if you have someone like a dissonance beat performer or something that isn't able to heal as much, if you're able to dodge more of those attacks, especially that 3-hit consecutive swing, it will help a bit on the healing requirement. And that was our run. So one small tip to the end here is that we did notice that on the difference between Master 4 and Master 5 seemed pretty significant in terms of the mob health and the incoming damage. So definitely going to be something that you're going to want to gear up for and be ready for as we go further on. And hopefully this guide will help you guys get success at getting that gear and then moving on with the other Master dungeons. So again, if you guys like the video, leave a like down below. If you want to see more videos like this or you like the formatting, definitely let me know. I don't know if the map is going to be useful for you guys, so like I said, if you found the map useful, let me know. and I will continue to do that. It did take a little bit of time to try and figure out how to do it, and obviously the map isn't like one-to-one, but hopefully you could see kind of what I was going for. Anyway, I will catch you guys in the next one. Have a good one. Peace.